It's an honor to welcome President Enrico Letta, the former Prime Minister of Italy and the President of Jacques Delors Institute. We met with President Letta a year ago in Budapest, shortly after the release of his report, Much More Than a Market. Our exchange at the Business Europe Council of Presidents left a lasting impression. He brought clarity and a long sought-after sense of urgency to the conversation on Europe's competitiveness and the future of the EU single market by offering a sharp diagnosis and practical direction. One key message from the report was the EU's urgent need to reinforce the international dimension of the single market, especially with its key neighboring partners, already highly integrated into the single market, such as Norway, Switzerland, Turkey, and the UK. A year later, the urgency has only grown. Global competition is tougher, and pressure from the US and China is mounting. While new EU initiatives are underway, President Letta continues to sound the alarm. Don't lose focus. Avoid short-term distractions. Take faster and bolder action. The priority must be completing the single market and putting competitiveness back at the core of the European conversation. Mr. Letta says, progress will not come by inertia. That line resonates, especially as EU-Turkey relations are too often falling into that trap. Inertia instead of action. President Letta, the Turkish business community is paying attention. We want to be a part of the solution, and we are eager to hear your vision. President Letta, the floor is yours.
Dear friends, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really very pleased to have the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience and to share with you some thoughts. I will be more than happy to continue this conversation in Istanbul, in Turkey, in the fall, because I strongly believe, as I wrote in the report, that the relationships between EU and Turkey are part of the fundamental perspective of the future of European competitiveness, the pan-European competitiveness. I thank you very much for this invitation, and I thank very much Markus. I thank him for his fantastic work in trying to connect all of us in a really very deep, important, and without any rest work to relaunch the European competitiveness. Thank you. Thank Markus for that, and thank you for the future cooperation. As you said, the report was written, as also the Mario Draghi's report, in a period in which urgency was there, but today we have the sense that this urgency is growing. It's growing for many reasons. First reason is because we don't see an immediate end to the big instability that was brought by the Russian invasion to Ukraine. Second, because this tension brought in Europe a big instability on one of the key factors of competitiveness, that is the energy price, and this is still a big problem for European companies. Second, because the tariffs war, and this tariff war was something unexpected in this dimension, bringing instability, and of course is the, I would say, the worst enemy for entrepreneurs and for cooperation among companies and among countries. The third big part of the instability is the fact that in general, the security issues and the reshaping of the new order is something that is until now more in the disruptive phase rather than in the reshaping. We all know that the old order and the old institutions, starting with the WTO or on the other, all the other institutions, were not at the level of the ambition on cooperation, competitiveness, and the new challenges. But the disruption that is taking place since some months is something that worries me very much, and bringing us to think that as Europeans, we have to give answers to react to all of this uncertainty. I think for an entrepreneur, uncertainty is the worst enemy. Stability and knowing which are the rules and which are the perspective is the fundamental set of framework, which is the core of my report, and why my report can be interesting for Turkey and for the relationship between Turkey and the European Union. The key issue is the fact that we were all countries used to work in a world in which fragmentation and the old rules were a set of framework that we were able to adapt to it. But the big changes are obliging us to consider that the pan-European competitiveness system needs to be adapted, and to be adapted to something that is happening and that needs for all of us some big changes. The most important one is based on velocity, simplification, how to be more smart in the way in which we do business. Technology is not enough for that. We need also rules that are able to work with this new world. This is what we miss in Europe. We have the feeling that in Europe the fragmentation of the rules is becoming today one of the worst nightmare for entrepreneurs and for what we can do. So this is why in my report I started by working on this topic of simplification, working first on the institutional part and launching a proposal that could be, in my view, interesting for your reflection. And the idea is to say Europe today is very difficult for investors from abroad and for investors and entrepreneurs that want to cooperate with Europe, because first of all, there is not one Europe on business. There are 27 Europe. We have 27 corporate laws, for instance. I can imagine for you how difficult it is to deal with an European Union in which you don't have one business law. You have 27, and you have to change from one country to another. So the first proposal of the report is the creation of a 28th regime. So an European business law able to work in a pan-European way, so able to simplify, to be a sort of passepartout, to help companies to have a simpler way of doing business. This idea is running now because the Commission decided to take this idea, and I would like to thank Marcus and Business Europe because I found immediate support from their side, because it is clear that this idea can be a game changer in the way in which the European Union is working, because today the fragmentation in 27 is a great gift that we give to all our competitors. The second big part of the report is dedicated to three sectors that I'm sure are fundamental for your business too. And the three sectors are the sectors where the single market is not integrated at all. In reality, we give the impression that Europe is one because we have one currency, one single currency. So we can give the impression that the single currency means that we are a single economy. But in reality, if you take the three topics that I put at the center of my reflection, financial market, 1, energy, 2, telecom markets, 3, we have 3 fundamental competitiveness fields where we are not 1, but we are 27. And being 27 is not a good news for all of you, because being 27, that means that we are all weak. and we are not able to create a pan-European competitiveness framework there. So this is why the report is a roadmap to integrate the three sectors, to create a single market of energy, a single market of telecom, and a single market of financial services. On this final point, the Commission bought the idea that I put on the table, and that was an idea that I elaborated with the cooperation with Business Europe, and this idea is the creation of the Savings and Investments Union. So the possibility for the private business to participate to the investment and to the raise of investments and to the link with the real economy. That is today one of the things that Europe is missing. I can tell you that if you ask me which is the main difference between Europe and the US today in competitiveness, of course there are many differences, but there are, in my view, two which are fundamental. The first is a cultural issue. We are in Europe, after the financial crisis of 2008, in a risk aversion mood that we have to eliminate. And we have to change rules to make possible that the risk, you know better than I do, that for an entrepreneur the risk is fundamental to create value. And the second point, that is the other fundamental point, is the fact that we are all too much dependent on public money investments. And in reality, with all the debts that our countries have in the European Union, the big difference is what we have in comparison with the US. If you take the US in the last 12 years, for instance, I give you just this figure and then I will end up soon, the US had the same level of investment 12 years ago between public money invested in R&D and private money invested in R&D. It was one public money and one private money 12 years ago. Today, the same one of public money, but the one of private money is multiplied 4 times. So they were able in 12 years to mobilize private investment, to give private investors greater returns and to transform it in boost, in fuel for competitiveness. This is what we didn't do in Europe because of the lack of the integration of financial markets. The Commission bought this idea of the creation of the Savings and Investments Union. I would be more than happy in autumn in Istanbul to talk with you in the way in which Turkey can be part of this exercise. And I end up with my final remark on the bilateral relations and the fact that you mentioned correctly that in my report I tried to put the focus on the international dimension of the single market. Because today, with the pressure we are receiving from China, from the US, we have to consider that the pan-European dimension is fundamental. This is why I worked and I'm working with Turkey, with Switzerland, with Norway, and with the UK. We have to create a pan-European competitiveness system. This is not by chance that in the report I put a reference to that, and I put a reference to the relationship with Turkey. And I would be more than happy to explore the possibility to raise this level of cooperation, because we need to do so. And let me say that as Italian as I am, I really am completely aware of how the Italian entrepreneurs are always happy working with Turkish entrepreneurs and working in Turkey and hosting Turkish investments. There's a natural capacity to work together, and it is really a shame that our institutions are not helping us to work better. So consider me totally on board of a common work that we have to do with Business Europe too, in the way to establish stronger ties and to work together for our common mission, that is a competitive, a more competitive Europe. Thank you very much.
President Letta, thank you for your strategic insights and your call for sense of urgency. Your message challenges both policymakers and the business community to stay focused and act more boldly for a competitive Europe. Since you'll have to leave us shortly, we'll take a few minutes for a brief exchange before continuing with Markus Beirer, Director General of Business Europe. Markus, just 2 weeks ago in Copenhagen at the Business Europe Council of Presidents, we had deep discussions on where Europe really stands on competitiveness, not just in theory, but also in practice. And you represent business voices from 36 countries and deal daily with these realities. So let me turn to you. What is your first reaction to President Letta's remarks?
Well, first of all, caro Enrico, let me thank you for being here. I know that it was very difficult for you to fix your agenda to be with us today, and I think this is an important sign that you really wanted to be with our Turkish friends, and I hope you will be able to continue the debate in autumn. So this is one. Number two, let me thank you for this very important report, because in the world we are living now, in a world with more uncertainties, disruption, which of course comes at a high cost, the single market, an improved single market, can be a big part of the answer. Meanwhile, we talk about the barriers we have in the single market, the barriers you have addressed in your report. We talk about that this is something like tariff equivalence. And we know when we are able to eliminate many of them, we can make up for part of the disruption we have in the world. Thank you also for thinking this pan-European. So this is, I would say, it's Business Europe style. It's Europe with the 27, but of course, including Turkey, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, all our friends, the UK, not to forget, all our friends around the market, linked to the market, part of the market. This is very important, and I think your report was very successful. The European Commission has just published its single market strategy. A lot of the points you have been pushing for, a lot of the points we have been pushing for are in there. So I would say the direction of travel is right. You will hear me saying this later on as well. But of course, the direction of travel is not enough. Now we need to push to get rapid delivery on many of the points you have raised. But I think people have understood that we need to overcome national pettiness, and that we need to strengthen this market, because at the end Europe can only be as strong as its economy. You have understood this earlier than others, and this is why the single market is so crucial. Thank you, Enrico. Pleasure to see you, and hope to see you personally soon again.
Mr. Letta, President Letta.
I completely share the point about the urgency today. And I know I'm among friends, so you can allow me to speak very frankly. I'm a little bit worried about one point. And the point is the following one. From my experience in Europe, in the European institutions, it's very difficult to be focused on 3-4 priorities at a time. Very difficult. There's a sort of, absorption of energy that is usually in one crisis at a time. And I'm very much worried about two aspects. And the two aspects that are the two crises that we are living in these months. And these two crises, they have two names. And the two names, in my view, are not the names that we need for addressing the topics that Markus mentioned and the topics that are part of my report and Draghi's report. And the two names are tariffs and defense. I want to be very clear and don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to say that these are not important topics. I don't want to say that defense is not an important topic. I'm totally aware of the importance of defense. And I'm totally aware of the importance of being able to react on tariffs and on the tariff war. What I would like to say is that the big risk I see is that we will be all following the debate hour by hour, day by day, with news coming from DC and discussion in The Hague and what is happening with Moscow and Kiev and so on. And it is correct and it is important to follow all these points. It is, I add, correct also to try to do all our best to integrate defense, to integrate the defense industry and so on. But I want to be very clear. There are three low-hanging fruit. And the three low-hanging fruit are the topics that I mentioned before. And the big risk is that if we focus only in the daily debate on tariffs, in the daily debate of 3.5 or 5% on defense, the big risk is that we won't find the energies, the political energies to focus on how to catch now, how to take now the three low-hanging fruit, how to create now a European financial market, how to create now a European energy market, how to create now a European telecom market. And transversal to all these points, how to create this passepartout, as I mentioned before with the 28 regime, how to create this simplification path for companies and investors. Because, you know, to get this 3+1 low-hanging fruit, as you said before, it is not by inertia. We need to struggle, we need to fight, we need to overcome obstacles, we need to reshape our system. It needs energy and time. And what I'm seeing today is all the system focused on a debate on 50%, 10%, 3.5%, 5%. I think raising investment in defense is correct, is important, but the most important part of our job has to be the integration of the pan-European and the European system and the simplification. And to get this result, we need energy. So this is why I think your audience and your voice could be very important. Turkish voice on these topics is absolutely fundamental to say we have to do what is needed to integrate defense, to be more secure, to react on tariffs. But the big mission is to integrate and simplify today. And the big mission is to create conditions for competitiveness. And I say that because there's a fantastic possibility for the pan-European competitiveness system today to work together and to overcome misunderstanding of the past and the inertia, as you said before, that was maybe the rule of the game. I strongly believe that today this pan-European system has to work in a different way. There's a different dynamic. With the UK today, the European Union is opening a new sort of dialogue. The same is happening with Switzerland, and the same, but it was easier, is with Norway and Iceland. I think with Turkey, it's time really to turn the page and to look to the past, to the future, without continuing to have this, I would say, looking the past and the past misunderstanding. And this is why on this problem of focusing on the two fundamental aspects today that are competitiveness, that are simplification, that are integration, and if you allow me to spend 30 more seconds on the other flagship that I put in my report, that is the fifth freedom. I would like just to share with you this idea of the fifth freedom, because I know that Turkey is a country that is working on this idea on innovation, knowledge, research, skills. Your universities are working very hard on that, and I know it because of my university and academic daily work. What is the fifth freedom? In the single market we created in the 80s, we have four freedoms. The freedom of movement of goods, services, capitals, and people. These four freedoms are telling us the story of the economy of the last century. This quadripartition is very old economy based. Goods, services, capitals, and people is usually what we touch. But the future is the intangible. The present and the future is the intangible. Is there where the other part of the world are really running. And so the idea to launch this fifth freedom, the intangible in the economy, the big investment in innovation, the big investment in research, in knowledge, skills, incentives there, and the capacity to work together in a more integrated system with the same rules and the same passepartout to be absolutely faster. I strongly believe that this idea of the fifth freedom can be another very important topic where the European Union and Turkey can work together, and I really am looking forward to discuss with you how to implement it concretely, because I know how important it is for you, for your business model, and for the way in which Turkish entrepreneurs are becoming more and more competitive at world level. And this is why the cooperation among you and the other European countries is absolutely crucial and fundamental, as Markus just said.
Thank you. Thank you, President Letta. Your emphasis on the EU-Turkey customs union with the broader context of the single market is a critical message for us. TÜSİAD and Business Europe have long underlined modernizing customs union is not just about trade. It is a strategic instrument, a rule-based framework that makes both EU and Turkey more competitive, more resilient, and ultimately more prosperous. Yet, everything in Europe is complicated. EU bureaucracy sometimes feels like a Kafka novel to us. Given your perspective, what would be your key recommendations to policymakers in Brussels and across EU capitals to move this agenda forward without losing any further valuable time?
As you said, there's a problem of timing and of urgency. On a suggestion coming from Business Europe, I decided in my report not to propose any treaty change. I decided to put in my report only proposals that can be applied immediately with the present rules. I am convinced that is the way to address the problems that we are having today, and not wasting time in complicated institutional debates. I think the discussion with the customs union has to be a discussion in the same way, using the present rules and trying to use the present rules in the better way. But at the same time, we know very well that maybe we can try to use the frame that I put in my report as also something that can be interesting for the relationship between Turkey and the European Union. What I mean that the title of my report is much more than a market. And I'm strongly convinced that relationship within the single market and the international dimension of the single market, we have to consider it that is much more than a market. Much more than a market. It is more than that. If we limit our relationship to some rules, we don't understand the strength of the possibility and the potential of this capacity working together. So my suggestion is to consider that the discussion on the customs union is much more than a market. It is the same. It's something that means that we have to restart from trust. And I think the role of Business Europe having you on board can be absolutely fundamental and decisive. And this is why I decided to give a signal, putting the reference of Turkey in my report. And this is why now in the implementation of the report, we can use this umbrella, this general framework to help the fostering and the improving of the relationship, to have a better customs union, to create an evolution. You know, this is what is happening today with Switzerland, where I think the good result of the negotiations they had, without giving too much emphasis, but working hard. And today they are ready on both sides to implement, I think, some good improvements. I think we have to consider that with Turkey, there's also today the political, I hope, possibility to do so. But there's, first of all, the urgency from both sides to consider that our destiny is really a common destiny. In this world of instability, in this storm in which we are, we think, and we have to think, that the European Union and Turkey have the same destiny. As the UK, as Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland, we are sharing the same pan-European geopolitical and geostrategic framework, and we share ideas, we share rules, values. We have to work together, and this is the time to do so. So I'm more than happy if I can be of help in that, and I think we have to consider that building up a strategy to improve it, and to, I would say, to take the example of what is happening also with other countries. I take the example of Switzerland, can be, I think, something very useful and very positive. What I would like to say in a nutshell is that we have to take advantage of the mess that is happening around us, because the mess that is happening around us is bringing all of us to say, hey, listen, we have to go to basics. And basics are that we are in the same space of the world, in the same piece of land, in the same piece of the Mediterranean. We are, our destiny is a common destiny, and we have to consider that what unites us is absolutely more important of all the nuances or the divisions. So I think we have to take advantage of what is happening around us, and we have to move in the direction of the cooperation.
Thank you, thank you, President Letta. I know you need to go in a second, but I'd like to give Marcus the floor for one last remark and question.
No, thanks again for your remarks, Enrico, and just to underline the latest point you have been saying. I think we need to, of course, we have challenges in this world, but there's also opportunities. And the opportunities is, of course, first, I mean, Europe can position itself as the place where legal certainty, rule of law prevail. And we see this in the capital inflow to Europe. And second, of course, this is also about a deeper cooperation with our long-standing partners and neighbors. And the customs union, it's great that we have it, but of course, and we will talk about this in a second, we need to deepen it, we need to modernize it, we need to make it fit for purpose. But it is also, and you alluded to this, Enrico, it's also about trust, of course. A single market is not only about sharing economic benefits, it's very much also about sharing values, respecting the rule of law, and making sure that we integrate the market even more. And I think in this respect, it's very important that the reforms in Turkey continue in order to allow us to grow together closer and closer, step by step. So thank you for really underlining this, Enrico, and it's really an honor to have you with us today. Grazie mille, ci vediamo.
Grazie a te, Marcus. I would like to end up underlining your final points, and just to end up, if you allow me, to say to all of you that you play a fundamental role, both in Turkey and in Europe. Do not underestimate your role. The voice of entrepreneurs today is crucial. The voice of entrepreneurs to ask for more cooperation, to the respect of the rule of law, to the respect and the creation of this common framework is absolutely fundamental. In Turkey, I think your battle, your fight is our fight, our battle, and with the European Union. Marcus knows very well that the success of my report is based on the cooperation with the stakeholders, is based on the proactive and very vocal role of the entrepreneurs, clearly saying and telling to the European institutions there's no time, we have to act. And the voice of the entrepreneurs today is more, is really a credible voice when it goes in that direction. So I thank you, but I would like really to relaunch and to end up with a call for action. Your voice, your proactive voice, your protagonism is something fundamental, important, and we give it great importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Letta. We look forward to hosting you in person as well, and we'll continue, and also continuing the conversation on and the call to action to Europe together. Thank you.
Before we start, I'll say a word.
Please.
So, I didn't have a chance before. So, günaydın. Sizlerde burada olmak büyük onur ve mutluluk.
Günaydın, Marcus.
Günaydın.
Now that President Letta has left us, let's bring the conversation to the real economy and to the challenges facing European business and to the need for a more strategic and structured EU-Turkey integration partnership. It is often said that the US innovates, China imitates, and EU regulates. But we know that the world is changing, and business as usual is no longer an option. And so let me start with the big picture. As the global order emerges, the new global order emerges, where do we stand on broader Europe's competitiveness and resilience? What are some of the top priorities on the agenda, and what should be the next concrete steps be?
Well, thank you, John, and thanks again for the invitation at this very important moment. I think what is for sure is that Europe for too long has taken economic success and competitiveness for granted. Business Europe and the whole Business Europe community has raised this forcefully over many years, and it worked up to a certain extent, but I think starting with the European Commission, it has been taken for granted that the companies will anyhow make sure that there's business success, and there can be a lot of focus on other things, important things, but it has been partly forgotten that at the end the strength of Europe comes from its economic strength. So I think this is well understood now. Orhan has talked about the new competitiveness agenda, and it is there. I think we have together driven this show. I think I can say we are instrumental. We have asked in a campaign which we called Reboot Europe. And the reboot means the computer is right. We cannot do on our own. Every member state on its own is lost. I mean, this was true in the past. This is true more than ever. I mean, we live in a world where it is about more the blocks, unfortunately. But we have so many bugs we need to fix. And I think this is well understood now. I mean, Business Europe always asks its members, why do we invest elsewhere? Why do you not only invest in Europe? Of course, it's very good to invest internationally, But why is it that investment flows is what they have been in the past couple of years? And then the answers are clear. It's the cost of energy, of course. I mean, this is the asymmetric shock from the war in Ukraine. But then, of course, it's regulatory overburden, it's too lengthy procedures, is what you call that things are too burdensome, take too long. And this is where we need to change. And as much as, of course, we are in the right direction now, of course, I would also say we are in the most dangerous phase now. Because I think we have changed course, so the direction of travel is right. We have an ambitious simplification agenda, and I know it's a hard sell. I've been, I think, in 14 capitals in Europe in the last 6 weeks, and I also get statements like, well, wonderful, now you clear up part of the nonsense you have created yourself, I mean you, meaning everybody in Brussels, and you want applause. I mean, this is not about applause, this is about understanding that things need to change. And if you look at the first steps that have been done this year, I mean, what we call omnibus in Brussels, part of the simplification agenda, this is huge. This is really game changers. This is when we talk about the due diligence, the so-called CSDDD. This is really taking out most of the grievances we have always asked for. So this is tier one, this is eliminating the sanctions on global turnover. This is eliminating the Europe-wide liability, and so on and so on. So I would say the direction of travel is right now. That's very important. But of course, this is the first steps in a long row of steps. We need to bring the continent back on track. Do I think this will work? Well, of course, there's no guarantee. We just had a dinner with the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, last Friday. And I can say, I think she has fully understood. She is eager to listen to business, and she is committed to making this change work. So I think the direction of travel is right, but there's a long journey ahead of us to really bring the ship back on track.
Thank you, Markus. So the direction is right, there's a long journey, and there's a lot of turbulence that is not necessarily caused by Europe this time. I can't resist asking you about the current state of the transatlantic relations. I know you recently visited Washington, D.C. and released a position paper on EU-US relations, and the paper also highlights the needs for both sides to recognize the role of EEA, EFTA states, and Turkey as integral parts of the transatlantic value chains and of the EU single market. You also call for a modernization of the customs union as a part of that agenda. So let me ask, what are your key takeaways from your US discussions, and what do you expect in the coming weeks and months on the transatlantic relations?
Well, I mean, let me start a bit with what Enrico said. So he said he fears that the Brussels system can only focus on one thing at a time. I mean, many of us travel to Washington often. So until, let's say, a year ago, I was always a bit frustrated by a similar saying. So we were coming with important sayings, be it TTIP or others. And I was always told, well, that the Washington system can only deal with one thing at a time. So this seems to have changed. I'm not sure this is my preferred option, so that you wake up every morning and have a look what has happened. But okay, that's a reality. I mean, look, for the US, I'm a bit more, I mean, we have been 3 weeks ago and we had intensive talks. We always talk to all our counterparts, starting with the US Chamber and NAM and so on, and administration. I'm a bit more optimistic now because I have the feeling that we have a decent negotiation structure developing. So, of course, there's two routes. There's the so-called reciprocal tariffs. I mean, this at the time being 10, or otherwise for Europe 20 or even 50, what have you, %. So this is one route, where I think part of these tariffs might be here to stay, because I think they have switched from from a leverage angle to a revenue angle up to a certain extent. But of course, they must be as low as possible, and there is threats on the wall which are also totally unsustainable for US business. So I think this is the one route. The other route, which is a very dangerous route, is of course these 232 routes on certain sector. So where we already have tariffs on cars and steel and aluminum, but where you have investigations on pharma, on lumber, on critical raw materials, on trucks, and on semiconductors. So what I feel is that we have a negotiation structure emerging now, and there is a will on US side to find a deal. So this is rather positive. Of course, I don't think that everything will be solved by the 9th of July, but the issue is that I think by the 9th of July there is a chance that there is a structure, there are certain cornerstones, there's a roadmap, and hopefully the avoidance of very disruptive tariffs which would only harm both sides. Talking about not only being pushed by this, I mean, you talked about our Council of Presidents in Budapest. I mean, we just recently had it in Copenhagen. And after the council ended, there was this idea of the 50% tariffs on everything. So I can tell you 2 months ago, and we always have a little dinner with the DGs who stay. So I can tell you 2 months ago, the whole dinner would have only about this until midnight. At this very moment in time, it was rather, colleagues were basically saying, let's discuss this on Monday if it's still there. And the truth is, on Monday, of course, we are still in a very difficult phase, but on Monday the situation had changed already. So to end with one thing, because from Washington we went on to Ottawa at the B7, where we represent Europe and the US Chamber, the US, and Kedan-Ren, Japan. And the Japanese chief negotiator, we asked him, of course, I mean, how do you deal with the negotiations with the US? And he said, we will hurry, slowly. And I think it's very much about, of course, avoiding escalation, but it's also not about making deals that have a limited value. And I think one of the problems of this deal the UK has done is it's non-binding, so to be seen. And it's about finding the fair balance between not escalating if avoidable, but also not to be seen as a prey. And I'll finish on this. I mean, in Washington we've been told, well, guys, you're not even in the queue for the negotiations, so you need to hurry. And we told them, look, there must be a mistake. We are your most important trading partner, so of course we have an interest to find a solution, but so have you.
Thank you. It certainly seems like that the volatility on that front will continue for the next few months until there's a settlement, there's more clarity. And there's never a dull moment in those discussions. I'd like to steer the conversation from a less reliable economic partner like the US to a much more reliable economic partner, Turkey. What are your views on the strategic value of updating the EU-Turkey Customs Union? What are some elements that you think it has to include, and how would it contribute to our joint competitiveness, to the real debate that needs to be at the center in Europe today?
Well, first of all, let me start by what I said to Enrico. I mean, it's a real pleasure to be here, because in Business Europe we have always seen Turkey, Turkish economy, Türkiye, TÜSİAD as an integral part not only of our value chains but of our family. So that's very important. And as Enrico said, the challenges which come with the disruptions we have in the world, and I think it's not more and not less that the world we have all grown up is about to fade away. So we go to a different world which is less based on rule of law, trusted global partnership. It's more based on strengths. But of course, in such a situation, it's very important to build upon our own strengths, which are economic. Of course, we need to build all the others, defense, economic security, and so on, but you can only do with a strong economy and also in a system when it is about to be taken serious. When we look at some of the players in the world, I mean, you're only taken serious if you're economically strong. So this is we need to work upon. There's the internal part we need to do. And then there is the opportunities like deepening the partnerships we have in our immediate neighborhood with long-standing partners, Turkey, the United Kingdom, others. And of course also diversifying our global import and export markets. Coming to the customs union, I think this can be a key driver. We know that it's very good that we have it. We know that without the customs union, our trade, the trade we do between the EU 27 and Turkey would be 60% lower. So it's very good that we have it. We must not forget this. But of course, it's not fit for purpose. It is from a time where many things were not in. So we need, of course, to have all goods, including agriculture. We need services in. We need public procurement in. We need state aid in. We need to find rules to integrate Turkey more also in the acquis as far as the green transformation is concerned, as far as digital is concerned, as far as AI is concerned, as Irma has referred to. So this is opportunities. Well, I know there's grievances. So I think we share the necessity to have a strong dispute settlement, to deal with the issues we are having. We have a system which doesn't allow us to deal with the system. We need an independent system that allows us to deal with the issues that appear. And I know there's other things we'll need to solve. But I can say that as European business community, we are very committed to a modernization and to a step up in the customs union.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll go back to the customs union. But I also would like to ask you about how Turkey and the EU can cooperate in third countries. There are a lot of developments that push us into partnering together in these geographies, including the reconstruction of Ukraine, reconstruction of Syria, and also possible cooperation opportunities in Africa for projects. And it seems to me that if Turkish companies are not integrated into the European mechanisms for this reconstruction in these countries, which include also financing mechanisms, we will have a divergence, and you will see European companies and Turkish companies competing for these same tenders. And here we are, we have complementary skill sets. The execution capability of Turkish companies on the ground in these geographies is quite high. How do you think we can cooperate, and what are some limitations of that cooperation and the reasons for that limitation?
Well, I mean, you know me well, so when it comes to Turkey, for me, cooperation is always very much on top of the list. I think there's two routes here. There is the route, in a route Europe is developing rapidly, which is the global gateway, where there is good opportunities to share forces, to cooperate, and also to create more added value in third country markets. So I think this is a route we can explore more. We have a new commissioner responsible for the file, Josef Sikela, Czech commissioner, guy who knows industry, who has worked in industry, who was a good minister of industry of his country. So I think there is opportunities to develop alongside this route. And I think this can be very much mutually beneficial. On the reconstruction of Ukraine, I must say this is a bit more tricky. I think where we agree is that we need more transparency, we need more clearer system, and we need a better system with clearer rules for public procurement. And as much as hopefully peace will be coming to the country, I mean, I think this is what we all hope for, we will need to more and more forcefully push for this. Otherwise, for the existing tenders, of course, I also need to take into account, to be very honest on this, that I have a couple of members, of course, also pushing for an EU preference there. Of course, also pushed by what the US is doing, asking for US preference. So this is a point where we certainly will need to discuss more to see, I mean, how we can find a feasible way forward. But I think in the framework of the global gateway, there is ample opportunities.
Thank you. I'd like to get back to the green transition for a second. This has been a big topic for the last decade. It seems like our transatlantic partners don't see this at the top of their agenda. And as President Letta was saying, Europe has trouble focusing on more than one priority at a time. Where does green and industrial transition, where does the clean industrial deal land on all this volatility? Is it still a priority for European business? Because it's very important for our companies to adjust and to be in alignment with European priorities on the green transition.
Well, I mean, I think here the direction of travel is still there. And you know that the European business community has always firmly stood by the goals of climate neutrality by mid-century and of the transformation. And this, of course, also creates opportunities. At the same time, we have always said that it needs to be done differently. And I think this is something which starts to be understood, because in the past, we have mostly talked about the goals without talking about how do we get there, how do we make it possible for industry to do their transformation, and how do we make it economically successful. And I think this is what we're doing more now, so we don't talk about the Green Deal so much anymore, we talk about the Clean Industrial Deal, which is also a different approach to the story, to make sure that this is done in an economically successful way. And I think the mood is changing on this. I can say things publicly now in Brussels where 2 years ago I would have been heavily criticized. Of course, you still have people that say the simplification agenda, isn't this a heavy deregulation? Don't you betray the goals? And I said, no, we are on a rescue mission. We are on a rescue mission for the business location, which means we need to do more based on facts, based on economic feasibility, and less based on ideology. So we need a fact-based policy, and I think we go in this direction. But I also say we are also in a rescue mission for the goals you all want to defend. Because if industry is not investing in a transformation, which didn't happen sufficiently due to frameworks which were too much based on ideology, not enough on economic feasibility, then the whole thing will not happen. You can write it on a piece of paper, but it will not happen. And again, I mean, we're still far from the final success here, but we are in a phase of important change to make this possible.
Thank you. What is your one message to EU and Turkish leaders about what needs to change in the way we approach EU-Turkey relations? What needs to change for us to actually take action and start creating more value together?
Well, I mean, I think first, I mean, as I say, let's sit together and let's modernize this customs union. Second, what Enrico said, I mean, it's about trust. So when other trusted partners in the world come to a level where you never know what happens when you wake up on the next morning, there's a good opportunity to prove that Turkey is a trusted partner for Europe and is an integral part. So I think this situation is creating opportunities. And when I was at breakfast outside chatting with some of your members and colleagues, I was watching the film, of course not understanding, but seeing the pictures, and I've seen a lot of pictures of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, which I very much appreciate because, I mean, first I was always fascinated by Atatürk. I think I read 3 biographies because I think he is for sure the most successful or one of the most successful politicians of the 20th century. So I think you have a roadmap. And I mean it. I think there's nobody in the 20th century who succeeded the changes, the huge changes. I mean, what people clothes, what people wear, education, how you write, everything, and all this in a sustainable way for many decades and without blood. Fascinating. And I think many people in Turkey understand what it takes to be an integral part of Europe. And we are most ready to support this, and I think TÜSİAD plays an integral role here.
Thank you, but I feel like you've avoided one part of the question, which is what would be your message to the European leaders on this?
Well, my message to the European leaders is we move to a world where, of course, what we do, I mean, first we need to stick to our values, of course, because, I mean, this is what distinguishes us from the rest of the world. This is what causes this capital inflow we have at the time being. Second, it will only be worth something if we get our own house in order. So if we continue to do reform, simplification, get down the cost of energy. But third, sticking to our values means in the future we will need to distinguish between what is really our values and what is the moralizing folklore we have created around it, what I called ideology before. And I think this will hopefully make us more open for seeing what is the things we need to talk about and what is the things where we might have run around, you know, with the finger in the air, where many partners in the world, I mean, I don't need to stay in this region. I mean, Japan, South Korea, on many things we have proposed, told us, okay, what the heck do you want? So I think this is what we need to change in order to protect the core of what we have and to be a system that is working. And I think I'm a deep believer in the European way of life. But this will only work if we prove to the world that we can do it economically successfully, because then we will have followers in the world. If we are just running around with moralizing finger in the air, this will not work.
Thank you. As we're coming to an end of our panel, are there any other comments, remarks that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I would just say let's continue to do step by step. I know that I have been here on this topic many times. I know we would like to have the customs union modernization already done, but it's moving. We have the technical dialogues, we have the high-level economic and trade dialogue, so it is moving. Let's invest in this process. I think there is a major opportunity here. And I think you know that you have a strong partner in us to make this happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. I would like to finish with 4 quick messages today. First, if Europe is serious about resilience and global competitiveness, it must be equally serious about engaging Turkey, not just as a partner, but as a core part of Europe's strategic future. Second, EU-Turkey relations need a pragmatic, structured, values-based revitalization, focusing on and long-term economic alignment while keeping the accession perspective. Third, modernizing the customs union, as we've discussed, is the clearest path forward. It would need to include addressing the irritants and the problems caused by the current agreement, which is 30+ years old. It needs to include chapters originally left out from the customs union agreement, such as agriculture, dispute resolution, dispute settlement, government tenders and services. And it should also take into account today's strategic priorities, such as green transition and the clean industrial deal, digital transformation and integration into the digital single market, and industrial competitiveness, maybe even including the defense industry. And lastly, progress requires bold leadership on both sides and commitment to this process. Implementing a robust reform agenda in Turkey and democratic, economic, and social progress are key requirements for this roadmap. Our message to European leaders is as follows. Modernizing the customs union is not a favor to Turkey. It's a shared European interest. If we are not making plans together, we will each start working on our separate plans. And at a time when global conditions demand speed and coordination, failure to move forward toward convergence will only widen the gap and make future crises harder to manage. Trust was mentioned today. Trust is not restored through words, but through clear rules, urgent follow-up, and transparent engagement. What we need is a predictable EU-Turkey relationship rooted in shared values and deeper economic integration. It is time to stop pointing at all the hurdles and challenges and to start clearing them together. We need to move forward and create a future where EU and Turkey are more resilient, more secure, and more prosperous because they work together. Thank you.